Welcome everybody to the Full Court Press Hydrogen interview series, part of the Energy Transition Dialogues here at Gulf Intelligence. And I'm delighted today to be welcomed by Mr. 𝗦𝗵ici𝘂𝗹𝗱𝗁, who is the Global Group Chairman for 𝗨𝗹𝗁 Limited, based in Australia. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Andrew, I believe you're leading the business strategy and development behind many things, I'm sure, at your company, but in principle today, we'd like to chat about the breakthrough technology, hydrogen energy release optimizer, HERO. Tell us a bit about that for our audience and what that is.
Certainly. So HERO is a very unique catalyst. We've looked at the hydrogen argument from many aspects, and 𝗨𝗪 is essentially a fusion company. It's a nuclear company way back. And using all that technology and the grounding we had in that, we know hydrogen extremely well. So when we looked at hydrogen, we thought the best way to extract energy is to gain the excitation energy out of hydrogen rather than burning it. We don't believe burning hydrogen works. You end up losing a lot of energy, and the bandwidth that it burns in is in the ultraviolet, and that the transmission of the energy is very, very poor. So HERO acts as a catalyst whereby the hydrogen and oxygen flow across the catalyst, and immediately they're altered, and they don't like that. Nothing in nature likes to be upset. So what we try and do, what it tries to do is stabilize itself, like all things in the universe, and its easiest path to stability is water. Now, the moment it does that, it gives you a very large amount of excitation energy, heat, in return. It dumps that energy. What we do is we layer HERO, it's a very fine coating, across whatever you want to heat, be it water, be it gas, be it a hot plate, be it, whatever you need to heat. And that energy, about 92% of that energy transmits straight through to what you're heating. So we have an extremely high efficiency rate of moving the pure energy that's stored within hydrogen to whatever you want to heat. And we end up with nothing but pure water in return.
And so what's so unique about HERO? Have we not seen this particular technology or process done before? And
no.
How does it compare? What's your unique selling point, if you like?
Okay, well, the unique selling point is it's what's called a true catalyst. So it never gets used in the process. It is not part of the reaction. It causes the reaction. It's a home for the reaction to take place, but it never gets used in the reaction. And there is nothing like HERO whatsoever. We were able to patent it globally on that basis, that there is nothing like HERO, and the way it alters the hydrogen and oxygen to create this energy band so quickly. So we can go from 0 to 800 degrees in under 3 minutes.
And so what are the practical applications of that so far? You discovered this, I believe, or you patented it 2-3 years ago. Where are you applying? Are you applying it already, or where would you hope to apply it into in terms of everyday?
We're about to start applying it now into places like the food industry that require 220 degrees Celsius, lower pressure steam, but we also have high pressure steam units for power stations. We've done some studies on power stations. HERO can replace a coal-fired boiler in a power station. It's about 25% of the size. So you could turn an existing coal-fired power station into a hydrogen station if you wanted to.
And commercially speaking, how would that work? I mean, why wouldn't a fire station nowadays come to you and say, hey, we want your HERO solution. We're not going to use coal. It's dirty. Is it an expense issue, or is it just about supply? How fast do you see the implementation of this technology into those types of industries?
We believe probably within the next 5 years we're in that position. There's a lot of boxes you have to tick as you go along that road. All pressure vessels need to be signed off on. There's also around the world a real lack of coordinated thinking around the type of structures that are needed for safety around hydrogen. Every country seems to have its own different, way of looking at what is a reliable pressure, what's the right pipeline material to use, what's the right valves to use, what's the right control gear to use. So all those specifications are now starting to be looked at. So the ISO is now looking at how to bring that together. And many countries, including Australia, have joined that panel and are working with that. We are on the Australian panel. We've been invited to sit on that panel to help with that process in Australia.
Okay, and you're saying, of course, there's all the safety aspects of installing any new technology. How does this compare from a safety point of view, just on the surface, combustibility, etc., to other heat inducers, if you like? I mean, is that again a selling point of yours, that it's safer once implemented?
It's safer once it reaches HERO. So all flammable gases are flammable. You know, whether you're using liquefied petroleum or you know, kerosene or hydrogen, it makes no difference. When it reaches HERO, though, we make it inert, so the hydrogen cannot explode. That's why I see hydrogen has a self-explosion limit at about 532 C. We go straight past that without a problem. We've never had an explosion in the lab because we kind of make it inert by the very interactions that we cause to happen, and it immediately then goes to water. So there's, you know, we feel it's extremely safe and it's extremely practical.
And I mean, just let's talk a bit about we've talked about the safety and this, I suppose, the scalability and how proactive it can be. Your particular the business model side of things. What is the business model of HERO, and how? What are your plans for marketing it further and making it commercially viable, both for you as a company and as a supplier, and for those who are buying the technology?
Sure. So we're not selling the technology; we're selling the heat. So we're a service provider. Yeah, we're a service provider. So we will maintain all the HERO systems, and we feel that works far better. Also for us, gathering the data, telemetry data on all the systems is a mass form of research for us. So we get to constantly upgrade the system for ourselves and raise the efficiency for ourselves in the business model. We are vertically integrated, so we're looking at making the hydrogen, storing the hydrogen and using it down the entire chain, and we have different arms of the company doing that. We also have a finance arm in Zurich, Planet Power Finance, that is looking at running the financing of all these different structures that we're currently putting together.
And I mean, in terms of your market plans, in terms of growth into markets, into different geographies, I mean, I look at this region where we are in the Middle East, and there's a huge plans here for decarbonization, specifically for units such as desal plants and power plants. And you know, there's a huge initiative here in an oil and gas producing region to decarbonize. And yet there's this huge sort of water scarcity, for example, so desalination is huge. Where can your technology help a region like this in terms of its net zero or carbon neutral ambitions? I mean, are we at the practical stage where you could come in and talk to the Abu Dhabi government and say, hey, we can greenify your desalination plants today?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of ways you can look at HERO. HERO can be an energy producer in terms of power, electricity. We believe that the way forward in that is to use supercritical CO2 turbines. These turbines are 10% of the size of a regular turbine. They are circulating CO2 at a supercritical temperature, around 800 degrees, high pressure. Very small, very practical, easy to place, and will still put out something the size of the desk you're sitting at is around 10 megawatts of output. So it allows you to locate nodes of energy where you need it. So on the electrical side, we can do that. On the heat producing side, you can go through anywhere. If you look at anything in the office you're sitting in, or anything your viewers are looking around, everything in their office is heat produced. There's a heat component in everything. Those heat components, we are being bombarded by companies. After the number of awards we've won recently, we thought it would be the power producers ringing us. It hasn't been. It's been food. Food industry has been very big and very quick. There's luckily we're located in New South Wales around a major food hub, from Master Foods to Mars to all these heavyweight companies. They all turned up overnight and went, let's do a tour of your plant, come look at our plant, let's form a cooperative and let's start turning our plants into hydrogen and have the example for the rest of our companies around the world. So we're seeing that more and more, and we have many food producers from the US, as well as power producers, as well as many other, from leather goods to drying to milk drying. A tremendous industry in powdered milk out of New Zealand, and they've approached us recently that this is for them a tremendous way forward, because their government is offering huge incentives to them to go toward it.
Absolutely, and of course the food industry is a huge producer of user of energy and also pollutant. You know, depending which food category you're talking about, the meat industry is one of them, obviously, and all of them. So so you've been surprised by the demand from that particular sector, is what you're saying. You weren't.
Yeah, we knew it was there. Yeah. Yeah, sure. We knew it was there, but we were surprised by the level. It kind of went from 1 or 2 inquiries to 100. You know, we had people all around the world bombarding us, going, and you know, we've now got teams that are looking after different sectors of different industries and talking to them about how HERO would integrate, what it would do, how it would work. And luckily, because we're a heat producer, it's fairly easy to supersede the existing systems they have. So, you know, everybody from candy makers, as I said, right through to dried milk, ketchup in the United States, you know, they use, there's a plant in California uses 2.4 gigawatts of gas energy in 4 months, just in the canning period. You know, so there's some industries like that are going, we would love to replace that heat energy we're using with something like HERO. It makes perfect sense to us. So we're investigating all these avenues. But we also see electricity in nodes as a very, very big way forward.
Okay, and then in terms of your expansion of, you know, obviously the use of your service and your technology, if you like, by these sectors and growth, and you know, you're talking now across geographies. We will talk a bit about Australia in a minute, where you are, but in terms of the regulatory aspect of that, obviously for you to be able to sell your service, it has to be accepted within that particular country and as part of the regulation. Sure. And this is obviously quite a new technology. How much of a stumbling block is that for your growth at the moment, and where do you see the main points that need to be ironed out on the regulatory front, whether it's in Australia or in other countries?
Sure. So the regulatory situation, say in Australia, is at the moment they're saying that if we were to make our own hydrogen somewhere, bring it into a hub, use that hub to put the hydrogen out there and use HERO, there isn't a standard for that at the moment. So they are willing to implement a standard for it and willing to work with us, and that's why they've invited us on the Standards Council. So it's not that there is a lack of willingness to do it. I think the toughest country we're going to face is the United States, because every single state there is its own country. Mm-hmm. And then often a number of those states have independently elected energy commissioners in different bits of the state, who you have to then convince that this is fine. Right. So it's going to be a lot of work with the state governors, with the president, with the Congress, and we've started that work already. We're already talking to them. Congress has in fact a little hydrogen group that's forming between the Republicans and Democrats who are backing this, and they've formed their own group to sort of look at how they can speed this up, because they understand it too. I think the nice thing in what we've seen, however, is that everybody accepts that hydrogen is it. Hydrogen's the next thing. And that's the nice thing we've seen.
And there's certainly been, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but certainly over the last 18 months with COVID, and then so the conversations around climate change that seem to increase in the last 18 months for some reason, and obviously the solutions towards that, to cleaner fuels, etc., cleaner processes. Hydrogen is suddenly front and center. It's been around, as you said, for a long time, obviously, but it is very much part of the conversation now, both in attention and investment. I mean, we're seeing a lot more money and funding being poured into these solutions. On that point of funding and regulation, I mean, do you feel that there's enough investment being put into hydrogen solutions? Now we're going a little bit beyond here and now and talking about hydrogen as a whole, as an industry. Do you feel that there's enough confidence in the commercial viability and the sort of regulatory fund for others to be investing in this solution? We have certain bodies predicting that hydrogen will be about 20% of the global energy mix in the next 20, 30 years. How fast should the investment be moving into this solution?
I would suggest that the funding is available. You need to be clever in the way, and you're right, regulatory problems. And fortunately, we had the Prime Minister at our plant a few weeks ago, and it was a good opportunity to sit down with him and the Energy Minister and to say, listen, these are the barriers. that you're causing, that you need to overcome quickly, and they acknowledge that. The regulatory barriers around the world are causing some hesitancy in funding, but there is funding there. Definitely there's funding there. Governments are putting in money, although they are putting in money with the big boys, with the Billionaires Club again. And I do find that a little bit concerning, because a lot of the new tech is coming out of very, very small groups who could genuinely, use the funding, but don't know how to write out a form, if they fell over it. They have a lot of problems writing out forms and trying to get the government to listen to them. That's been a big concern of ours.
You mentioned earlier that you've got partnerships with, or you're investing in smaller companies as well, who are sort of, I suppose they're complementing what you're offering, if you like.
That's right. Well, that's why we set up Planet Power Finance. Planet Power Finance's job is basically not only to fund STAR's major projects via green bonds investments, in multiple ways, but to go out and find some of these really unique 1, 2, 3 person projects. And so far we've found 3 of them that are extremely unique, that complement what we want to do. And now we're starting to be approached by a lot more of people just going, look, we can't get funding, but we've got a really good idea. We can show you the idea, and luckily we've got the scientists, sitting here who can look at that and go, look, this is worth investigating. This is really clever. And some of them are just absolutely ingenious, but that they simply can't move forward, and that's a problem. Whilst your mega companies go to the government,
don't need the money, and they're getting it.
Yeah. Hey, look, I need 250 million this year. Sure. I've never understood that logic. They really need to be looking at the smart new things that are coming out, and that's why we've driven that agenda.
And in terms of sort of larger R&D, if you like, not so much investing in these smaller innovative companies, but R&D being poured into the bigger sort of decarb picture, if you like, how we going to store and transmit cleaner, greener power generation. Are we seeing in which you and your technology feeds into, obviously, ultimately at the end of the day, and as part of that solution? Again, are we, hydrogen is the buzzword these days, but are we seeing a big enough shift by governments in allocating R&D budgets, whether it's to academia that they support or directly, or is it just going to be left up to the private sector to basically manage?
I think at the end of the day, the private sector is going to play a very big part, but we are seeing it in Europe. We're definitely seeing a big push in Europe for a lot of money. You're starting to see it in America under the Biden administration. You're seeing that they're bantering around lots of sums. How that gets through Congress and then through the states, Lord knows. Here in Australia, they're actually starting to pony up some really serious money. There are some very clever storage solutions coming out of that as well. So yeah, I think that there is enough money, but there is enough private money out there as well. One of the big things we've noticed here is that there's been a dramatic shift away from any of the carbon products, from gas, oil, coal exploration, gas. So it's just been dumped. All the 4 major banks, the 4 pillar banks here, have just dumped anything to do with carbon. You've even seen places like Citi. Citi were the biggest lenders for carbon, any sort of carbon stuff in the world. And they have placed a very, very, very senior man now in front of sustainability to claw that back dramatically.
Yeah, and you've had the obviously the whole ESG funding investment scenario has also it's just increasing sort of exponentially. The environmental part of that is obviously the social part of that as well, but that is obviously exploding, and you're having bodies like the IEA telling oil majors, listen, you better shift your game if you haven't already. And we've seen a lot of the big companies start to make those shifts so that they can continue to be in favor of big banks like Citi and others. They're having to make that shift from oil and gas, not overnight, and obviously there's still a lot of money to be made from conventional energy, but clearly even the traditional sort of oil majors and companies are making that shift, and are going to have to look for partnerships with those who have the expertise. I mean, they don't have that expertise in-house at the moment. They're going to have to look to solution providers like your company to kind of help in that transition. Would you think that they're open to that?
I think they're open to it. The thing that genuinely concerns me with the whole hydrogen debate at the moment is everybody is talking about making it.
Yeah.
You know, so, what we get constantly told is you're the only demand side activator guys we've found. Everybody else is running around trying to make the stuff. And I think there's this illusion that export of hydrogen is the go. It isn't. It genuinely isn't. If you look at the development in floating wind, at every country pretty well has an access to floating wind. I mean, north of Japan, Japan can easily supply enough power for electrolyzers to give themselves hydrogen. It's ridiculous. We have an MOU with the entire Philippines, with the government of the Philippines, and that is to convert that country to hydrogen. And our first line was, let's look at floating wind. And they said, oh, we'd have to cover the country. And we showed them very quickly that they didn't. In the southwest quadrant of the country, there's more than enough energy from floating wind to provide them all the hydrogen they're ever going to need. In fact, they could probably export some. So that, I think this whole export argument is a bit of a worry. You're seeing a lot of people, you know, diving toward that. And I think that personally, that's a mistake. They need to drive domestic consumption first.
There is a lot of challenge. I was going to get on to that actually, in terms of that is one of the things that's been talked about. You know, that the technology is coming from experts, the technology for hydrogen production is coming from Germany, etc. And they're doing partnerships with companies here in the Middle East and countries here in the Middle East where we have the sun, we have some wind, but more sun, let's say. We have that renewable energy power, in which, and then the idea is to then re-export it, obviously, to the countries that need it. There have been quite a few partnership tie-ups in the last year or two on that front, but you're saying that that's not really the most viable way forward, that you can go in, your technologies can go into independent countries and they can just provide the solutions themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's when you go and talk to the floating wind guys, they're very, very clever the way they've gone about doing it, is they've built a platform that can effectively take any turbine. So they go to GE, go to whoever, you know, Chinese, be it Siemens, GE, whoever, and sit down and say, right, we can run these turbines. Most of them are now double-headed and most of them are pivoting. So they pivot to the wind. So their production is a lot better. And most of them are hurricane proof. So in terms of what's coming down the pipeline rapidly for energy production, you know, we've said to countries like the Philippines, your better bet is to store the hydrogen and move the hydrogen to where you want it. And that is going to be the key everywhere. And we've been telling our government here, there's for a long time been this argument that what you want to do is make all these electrons, use them in the system. When you don't need them in the system, sell the excess to hydrogen. I don't know who wants anyone's leftovers.
Yeah.
When we talk to solar people, they're all saying to us, we'd rather make hydrogen and get a 20-year contract to make that. It's more bankable than dealing with the energy providers.
Absolutely. You just said bankable again. It all comes down to the end of the day, at least long-term, the commercial viability. So you mentioned the Philippines example. Are there any other sort of emerging market economies or big consuming nations of energy who have to import energy usually, who can take advantage of that sort of logical model you're talking about, which is, you know, stop relying on, you know, having to get your hydrogen for energy from anywhere else, but let's use your own resources and your own geography, if you like, for these solutions. What are the other areas over the horizon view, if you like, for you that where you can take this?
Sure. You can look at Singapore, you can look at all the Asian peninsula, you know, coming down through Indonesia. A lot of these places like Indonesia is thousands of independent little islands that have huge problems. If you can give them a very compact energy solution for them, you can increase the GDP of that country dramatically just through production, just by people having power. You know, it changes that. Even in the Philippines, we were able to produce, you know, information for the government there showing very, very rapidly how you could, you know, how you could completely turn that country's fortunes around, stop being an exporter, become a net, an importer, become a net exporter, and start to become energy independent. Indonesia is certainly the same. Malaysia is the same. All those countries. Japan will be the same. I believe China has a massive opportunity with onshore and offshore wind. So definitely there's countries there. I just think this over exuberance on hey, we're going to make all this hydrogen and just export it everywhere. and the big question is then, is it ammonia? Is it liquid? Is it a stored, oil? Is it some sort of other mechanism? There's too much talk about that. I just don't see that. Countries want their own energy sovereignty, and they've wanted it for a long time, and this gives them the opportunity to have it.
And certainly if China gets it, then we're in real trouble. But
Yeah.
Andrew, one more question, just to sort of finish off our conversation, sort of your over the horizon wish list, if you like. You've developed a very novel technology that has a lot of potential going forward. What would you say would be, top 3 over the horizon viewpoints for you? What's next in this whole hydrogen picture? What do we need to move this whole sector forward faster?
Okay, so universal regulation would be lovely. Sort of one standard regulation model. A very, very good storage model that would allow you to store the hydrogen en masse and be able to move it, around a nation. That would be brilliant if they could do that. I think we're extremely close to that. And the last one would be to stop talking about carbon capture and storage. Carbon capture to me is nonsense. It's producing hydrogen with a ball and chain around it. We've been digging up carbon that's been, nicely stored by whomever in the universe has nicely formulated a way to store it, dig up, and we're digging up ancient death and decay and burning it, and now we're trying to bury it again. Either find a way to turn it into graphene so we can actually use it again, or alternately, stop talking about it and just move to the model that we all know we're going to end up at, and that's green hydrogen. So that's my biggest wish list. I just think we need to get off talking about stuff that is chewing up time and chewing up resources. We need to move to green hydrogen. We need to move beyond trying to prop up the gas industries and the coal industries. They've had their time. I understand business is business, but a new world is coming, and they've got to learn to adapt to how they can make money from that new world. So that would be my 3 big things.
Andrew Horvath, Global Group Chairman of Star Scientific, thank you very much for joining us today. Fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.